Authorities in Iran say a member of their paramilitary force has been killed as clashes between police and demonstrators escalate. Witnesses say the government is using tear gas and water cannon against protesters. More and more people have been taking to the streets over the past few days, angered by Iran's leaders and their handling of the economy. The protests have now expanded beyond the capital of Tehran into other regions. These pictures show protesters trying to break into a government building in the southwestern province of Fars. Cameron Matten is a senior lecturer in international relations at the University of Sussex in the UK. Welcome. We're now seeing protests in places like Fasa and Kudasht, far beyond Tehran. How much of the population is involved or at least in support of the protests?
Yeah, good morning, Melissa, and Happy New Year to you and your viewers. At the moment, it seems that the protests are in majority Persian speakers part of Iran. And I think this is of significance because the last major round of protests in Iran in 2022, when the Kurdish woman, Jina Amini, was killed by morality police in custody, it began from the periphery of Iran, from Kurdistan, and it remained active and quite intense in peripheral provinces such as Baluchistan, Khuzestan, and Kurdistan. This time, the protests have begun from Tehran, the capital city, which is, of course, has the most impact on Iranian state and Iranian economy. So in that sense is important, but the fact that it hasn't yet spread to non-Persian speakers parts of Iran is, remarkable in some sense. It seems that people in those regions are worried about the usually more violent ways in which the government deals with protests in those parts, as opposed to the major cities in Tehran or in Iran or in Tehran itself. So at the moment, it seems that it's mostly shopkeepers, the so-called bazaar or merchant part of Iran. But it has also spread, the protests have spread to major universities, and university students usually have played a much more radical politics in Iranian history. So that is also very significant.
Is there anything different that you feel about what's happening right now? You talk about the fact that, this time the security seems to be taking a slightly lighter approach than in the past?
Indeed. What has actually caused some rumors within Iranian social media is that, first of all, the protests began from Tehran Bazaar, which is the sort of trade, the heart of Iranian trade and merchant economy. And Iran's merchants have historically had very close relations to the clerical establishment. So that, in combination with the fact that the IRGC and other paramilitary forces of the government have not opened fire and have not used, deadly violence against the protesters, this has led to some people to speculate this might be instigated by some faction within the government to undermine the other, especially given that the Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, might be, become incapable of leadership because of his age, or he might die. So there is a succession, if you like, struggle behind the scenes. But no matter how it has begun, as we have seen from the footages we see, people, of course, join the protest, and it can go out of control as far as the government is concerned. And there were reports of a fatality among the security forces today. So there are some gray areas about this protest, but we don't know enough to say with any certainty about the dynamics of the protest at this point.
Now, one of the government's line is that foreign enemies are stirring up unrest. That's another claim we've heard in previous protest cycles, but we have seen a much more interventionist Israel and United States. Both have made clear they'd welcome regime change. So is there any merit to Tehran's claims? And I would love your thoughts on just how serious this is a threat to the regime right now.
As you mentioned, I mean, the Iranian government always attributes domestic protests to foreign instigators, but we know that the economic situation is nothing short of catastrophic. So to say that it simply instigates from outside is not accurate at all. But having said that, I think the Iranian government is extremely worried about the combination of crippling sanctions as well as inflation, corruption, the loss of legitimacy of Iranian state following the collapse of so-called resistance axis across the region from Palestine to Lebanon and Syria and so on. And the fact that in the latest meeting between Netanyahu and Trump, there were some sort of green light to potential new rounds of attacks on Iran's nuclear and missile program. So actually, in one of the reasons that some people say that the government hasn't used deadly force from the beginning against the current protests is that they are afraid of using force of that kind might actually inflame the protests, and that will further weaken the government in case there's a new kind of round of war with Israel and the United States.
Kamran Matan, Senior Lecturer in International Relations at the University of Sussex in the UK. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Behnam Ben Taleblu specializes in Iranian security and politics. He is Senior Director of the Iran Program at the FDD, or Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Welcome to DW. You've described this as a national uprising, far beyond economic grievances. What do the people want?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, Ben, and Happy New Year to you and all your viewers and listeners. No doubt we should be listening to the streets to hear what the people in Iran want, because there has been a pitched battle now for nearly 8 years between the street and the state in various iteration of national uprising or protest or demonstration we've seen since then. And what they want is quite clear. They want the government of the Islamic Republic gone in its entirety. So this recent measure that you mentioned with the government spokesperson offering dialogue and claiming to hear what is being chanted on the streets, unless the government steps aside in its entirety, and by government I mean the entire governing structure, the regime of the Islamic Republic, I think that we'll be in for a bumpy and rocky 2026 with more protests, particularly as the international crises surrounding Iran as well also look like they'll be heating up.
Can you give us an idea of how much of the population is involved in these protests, or at least in support of the demonstrations?
Well, no doubt, just like the reporter in the previous package said, these are the largest nationwide protests that we've seen since 2022/2023. That was the Women Life Freedom movement that was kicked off by the killing of a 22-year-old Iranian Kurdish woman allegedly over hijab infractions. That was Miss Mahsa Amini. But no doubt these are pretty important protests because they again shifted the consistent pattern of being triggered by a non-political issue, but being sustained distinctly by political issues. And as you see over the past 4.5 days already, there's been a contagion effect. 24 cities, towns, and even smaller townships, or you could even say large villages, have participated in these multi-city, multi-day long protests, and they only look like they're spiraling. The big question now is, will they be sustained into the new year, and will they be amplified by strikes across various different trade unions and labor unions? But there's no doubt, as we've seen in various iteration of anti-regime protests in the past, that large swaths of the Iranian population, sometimes even upwards of 80%, be it on social media, cyberspace, or even on the streets, have voiced their discontent with the regime.
The president is offering protesters dialogue, as we just heard. The government spokeswoman in that report saying the government will listen patiently, even to harsh voices. Will it really?
I severely doubt this. I essentially believe this to be a tactic akin to some of the selective, and I want to highlight the word here, selective openings up we've seen in Iran since the end of the 12-day war with Israel in June of 2025. Those selective opening ups were, some slightly larger public gatherings for concerts, as well as selective unenforcement or turning of a blind eye of that mandatory hijab that we mentioned. What this is designed to do, as well as now this faux olive branch, is to render the protesting or antithetical part of the population, is designed to render them apathetic. It's designed to render them taking them off the streets, you could say. So in short, I think the regime has shown over 46 years that it has no real way of changing, no real way of substantively meeting popular demands and popular opinion. And in this case, I think this is just another fig leaf for the Islamic Republic to limp along again while it faces internal and external crises.
But if the government doesn't offer the people real dialogue, won't they just go back to the streets, back onto the streets and protest?
Indeed. And in between just a few weeks ago, when there was somewhat of a small uprising outside of the memorial service of a prominent human rights lawyer in the northeastern city of Mashhad that many suspected the regime had actually killed and later said he died of natural causes. That was an opportunity where the population very briefly, in one small city came out. And it was then that I said that the matter of the next protest is a matter of when, not if. And even if these protests are not successful at dislodging the Islamic Republic, until those larger systemic grievances are met, the next major protest is again going to be a matter of when, not if. And that's why I think the Islamic Republic is going to be applying the same tactics with the same apparatus of repression, both on the streets as well as in cyberspace that we've seen in the past.
Behnam Ben Taleblu from the FTD's Iran program, thank you very much for seeing In the New Year with us. Pleasure.
Thank you.